Welcome. This is the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinscoe, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, Forbes contributor, and general explorer of the service and experience space. The thing I'm really interested in is how do we create organizations that produce better outcomes for both their customers and their people. This podcast has been running since January 2011, and so we have a big archive to explore. Check out the archive at adrianswinscoe.com. That's enough from me. Let's get into the interview. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Peter van der Putten, who is the lead scientist and director of AI Labs the AI Lab, pardon my tongue getting all tied, at Pega. Also is a returnee to the podcast. I've spoken to him before, so welcome back, Peter.
Thank you.
So Peter, I never assume that people are long-time listeners of the podcast, and so I always ask people to introduce themselves and give them a bit of a thumbnail sketch on them, just for the benefit of our audience. So if you could do that for us, that'd be great.
That's awesome. So indeed, the director of the AI Lab at Pega. So we're an American software company combining the brain and the muscle, AI and automation that our clients can use to provide better service or marketing, but also to drive more efficient operations, for example. And I'm responsible for AI innovation at Pega, right? So both talking to our clients, how they can, improve their business or get closer to their customers using AI. But the other very important part is also applying it to ourselves. So how can we come up with all kinds of new products, new go-to-markets, etc. around AI? And next to that, I'm also part-time assistant professor at Leiden University, where I'm trying to keep up with the cool kids.
Very good. Now, it's not just about producing stuff. You also come up with things that are ways of describing and or thinking about the stuff that happens around the world, like particularly in AI. And now I was speaking to Don Sherman on the podcast a little while ago, and he mentioned this left brain, right brain approach. But then I also saw him, because we're here at Pega World, I also saw Don speak about it on the stage, and then he also kind of know that he attributed it, the origin of it to yourself. And so I wanted to understand, or to hear it from the horse's mouth, as it were. Explain to me kind of like the thinking behind this left brain, right brain characterization, particularly with the reference to AI, because I think that'd be really helpful. It's a really useful way to frame that.
Yeah, I think
and how they are actually complementary to each other as well.
Right. Yeah. So because AI is a bit of a nebulous concept, and so much technical talk. So I use this metaphor actually a lot to try and clarify a little bit, what the AI landscape looks like. So when people hear AI nowadays, they probably think something like ChatGPT or whatever, which is generative AI. We're AI that generates stuff, text, images, whatever it is, entire applications. It's basically, you could compare it to creative AI.
Yes.
So in that sense, you could say, hey, metaphorically, that's the right part of our brain. Because somewhat you could say that's when people talk about that someone is a creative person, that
talk about the right brain. The right brain, yeah.
But we also have our left brain, and our left brain is more concerned with functions like reasoning or analytical analysis, but ultimately also with decisions, decisions to take particular actions that are optimal in a way, right? So it's basically our rational brain. So, and of course you get the best results of, when the rational brain and the creative brain are actually also working together, right? So to give an example, it could be in marketing. The creative brain could be used by marketers to come up with all kinds of creative recommendations you could give to customers, build a library of those recommendations, whereas the left brain could be used to really, let's say, as an engine at the moment, a customer contacts a company like a bank through whatever channel, opening up the mobile banking app or whatever it is, to then decide across those hundreds or thousands of recommendations which of those is most likely to be relevant for that particular customer.
Okay. No, I mean, because I think that's really helpful, because actually there is this thing right now, particularly in the industry space. I mean, across all industry, is that, as you say, kind of generative AI is almost become sort of like synonymous with AI, completely. And it's not that. It's like it's a tool in a toolbox.
Exactly.
And quite a big toolbox.
Yeah.
And actually, that was your session yesterday that you did, one of the breakout sessions, was about on where Gen AI is heading. And I wondered if you could give us the sort of the brief kind of, the headlines, as it were, sort of scare the bejesus out of us, or kind of make us feel comfortable that we know what we're doing and where it's kind of heading. But yeah, what are the headlines in terms of Gen AI and where it's going from your perspective? I mean, you're a specialist.
Yeah, no. So what I was talking about is that, like, even for me as a specialist, it can be, a time where there's so many things happening. It's hard to see the forest from the trees. Like in the Gen AI space, we have all kinds of new models coming out. Like Google, OpenAI, Meta, open source. And on the flip side, when you think about enterprise generative AI, everyone is talking about these use cases, and new use cases pop up left, right, and center. So, which is really exciting, but it also feels a little bit unsatisfying because you don't really know, like, hey, is there a pattern to it, to this all? Right. Is there something which is not just about a new model coming out next week, but really a trend that will remain valid for at least a month, a year, or maybe 2 years or 3 years. And for sure, I think there is such a trend.
Okay.
Within generative AI. The question is maybe not so much like where is generative AI going? Is you can also reframe it as where do we want generative AI to go?
That's fair.
Yeah, and
sure.
In an enterprise context, we talk a lot about the autonomous enterprise. It's a bit of a North Star for the ultimate enterprise that you could become. A self-driving business, much like a self-driving car, where the human is still in control, but the self-driving car or the self-driving enterprise is optimizing towards specific goals.
Yes.
So then it becomes actually quite easy to answer the question what Gen AI is going to be or what it should be. It should become more autonomous.
Right.
And that's basically, the breakout. I gave a path of 3 stages, basically, with increasing level of agency and autonomy.
Okay. So what would be those 3 things? Kind of quickly. I mean, I guess we're in phase 1, right?
We're like in a mix. So we're mostly in phase 1. We have, for instance, some things that fall in category 2 and some things, inklings that fall into category 3.
Right.
Category 1 is actually Gen AI as you know it today a lot. And of course in enterprise generative AI, it's no longer that someone is typing in a prompt and needs to copy the output into something. It's built into features, but underlying, the idea is still the same. There's one request that goes out to the Gen AI and you get an answer returned and that's it. And the prompt that's behind it is kind of, maybe some template or a dynamic prompt, but, basically just one go. And the Gen AI is almost a slave to us because it needs to sit there waiting for questions to be asked and give an answer. The next step, where we give it a bit more agency, is to say, well, why don't we give Gen AI tools? So we have this thing we call Knowledge Buddy, which is basically what AI people call a Retrieval Augmented Generative System, a RAG.
Yeah.
And we can ask it questions about a particular domain or topic. Let's say, I lost my credit card and I'm a Rabobank customer. So I want to have an answer about what do I need to do as a Rabobank customer if I lose my credit card. Now, how that works is that basically we give Gen AI a tool. We give Gen AI a search engine and we give Gen AI some content, which is all self-service documentation from Rabobank. Yeah. So the Gen AI can then first do a search, collect some search hits, and then formulate an answer based on those search hits. Now, so that's maybe stage 2, giving it 1 or 2 tools, but in a very scripted manner. Now, then you can see where we're going. And when it becomes more autonomous, so, why stop at one or 2 tools? Why not give it many different tools? But then, of course, it needs to figure out, how to use what kind of tool to reach a certain goal. Yeah, so we use then the creative powers of AI to create a plan. Yeah, so you have as a human, a particular goal you want to achieve or some fuzzy question. Gen AI kind of uses its intelligence to parse that ambiguous question into what do you really want to achieve? And then also can reason around, then I need to maybe use tool A, B, and C let me try that out and then see how much progress I have. Oh, and then I need to use the E and F.
Right.
And now I've reached my goal.
Okay.
And so then you're really talking about Gen AI, which is more agentic, which has more autonomy. And of course, that could be one of those autonomous agents, but there could be also a couple of them. And they could reuse each other as tools. They could start to work together as well.
Because you mentioned that term agentic, and that was a term that we did. There was an executive roundtable with yourself, your colleague Christian, and Rob. And Christian was talking about how we've only just scratched the surface of artificial intelligence, and he was talking about agentic, the techniques. And that was the one thing I was wanted to ask was like, so it's not just about Gen AI. It's like, what can we also come to expect with other things? What some other waves that we should be kind of like thinking about or be ready ourselves for? Because it's like, I mean, that's the thing is, it's like it's not going to stop here. There's going to be more coming. There's other tsunamis that are coming down the track.
Yeah, no, and multi-agent systems is like a prime example because that has been a pretty like I'm a part-time academic, and my colleague Kirsten is not in the room, so I can make a little insult. That has been a pretty dormant area in academics for a long time.
Okay. Despite the fact that he said he wrote his PhD on it.
Yeah, no, but
and he doesn't look that old.
A particular specialized community, yeah.
Yeah.
But now suddenly it became really popular, not just in Pega but outside Pega as well, because people, we were actually never really able to make those multi-agent systems, and you need to tell them everything they need to do pretty much, right? So whereas with generative AI, like we can use the power of generative AI to let them operate in a particular environment, make plans, communicate with each other, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of potential in that area, but that's opened up through generative AI.
Yeah.
And I think there's more areas like that. So if I move from the right brain to the left brain, I think actually that whole attention for generative AI, which is basically coming from, whatever, people doing their homework with generative AI and then getting a job and then thinking about we need to apply it in business. Ultimately, that increased the kind of the appetite to use intelligence within business process. And I think there will be also a bit of a return of interest in left brain AI then, right? So the examples that I just gave with the bank and making recommendations, that's an example of real-time decisioning. But then to be able to do that, and if you have many actions you could potentially take and many offers you could make, for example, then actually you need to have massively online learning to really learn, which action is going to be successful.
Yeah.
So online learning is a really important area. But there's also other kind of technologies that start to getting more traction, like process mining. Yeah, how do I uncover inefficiencies in business processes, for example?
And I think it's important to add as well is that and it's a theme that Pega has talked about over the course of the years around the transparency of different systems and how many systems are sort of auditable and defendable and supportable versus others that aren't. And with generative AI, it's sort of not really auditable. But the predictive analytics one is auditable. It's a bit like the left brain, right brain sort of thing. Is the right brain is like when you come up with a creative idea. It's like, how'd you come up with that? I was like, meh, I just came up with it. Being creative. Whereas if it's left brain, you've got to show your workings, right? You can't just go to a maths exam and go, no, and then write the answer down. Yeah. Because you only get a small percentage of the marks. You have to show your workings. Sort of thing.
And it might also be a level of maturity, right? Because, left brain AI has been around for longer periods of time. So I do think it's very good to have these kind of checks and balances, right? Yes. So transparency, fairness, explainability, how to deal with privacy or other forms of sensitive data, right? So I think that they're all like important aspects, and also to relate it basically to what is the particular use of AI. There's a particular use cases which are more innocent than other use cases. The less innocent use cases need more scrutiny, and there will be use cases where you say, well, we simply don't want to use AI in this particular use case.
Yeah.
So So yeah, I think these are. I think it's only an indication of maturity of a field that these wider ethical aspects are being taken into account, and both from the perspective of how can you actually do this, best practices or capabilities in AI products like we have, that you get an explanation if you get an answer from Knowledge Buddy, or that you can, in the left brain, that you can say, why did I get this marketing recommendation? So we build capabilities around that, or to test for bias in automated decisions, for example. And on the flip side, that's also complemented with ethical guidelines within companies, but also regulation. The EU AI Act is a good example, which the European Commission just kind of approved in May. But there's similar regulation coming out in other parts of the world. President Biden issued this exec order on trustworthy use of AI, but all geos in the world actually, they have some level of regulations or plans to regulate AI, which is a good thing.
No, absolutely. I think it's, you talked about the maturity side of things, and I think it's also kind of speaks to, there's a bit of a capability. So we have to recognize there's a bit of a capability gap in terms of understanding. Because I also know that I've been listening to the different conversations, and the generative AI can be as a really interesting attractor, and people are like, "Oh, tell us about that," and then you go, "No, actually, this is what you want." It's like you start with the right brain and you end up with the left brain. This is the more useful stuff for me right now. And what it speaks to is that sort of maturity of understanding of what is possible and what's not. And I see flashes of how it's kind of similar to when there was the big data sort of wave and the big data analytics kind of wave. And there was a serious gap around, the data analysis skills, but then there's also a serious gap at the leadership level about understanding what it means to do, to take those data-driven, make data-driven decisions. And I think we're seeing a similar sort of thing there. And there's a big education sort of kind of piece that needs to kind of be done, I think.
Yeah. And definitely it's important to do AI literacy in an enterprise context, but also in a societal context, right? If we talk about ethical use of AI, that's something that concerns us not just as business decision makers, but also as citizens, for example, or consumers.
Yeah.
So I think the good thing compared to the example that you gave with big data, and then it was a little bit wishful thinking, there's data, the amounts of data are ever growing, automatically that will lead to benefits. You just need to put it in some big data warehouse somewhere, and then data warehouses were no longer trendy. You just need to put it in a big Hadoop cluster. And then that was no longer trendy, and it was like, you just need to put it in the cloud. But nothing is magically going to get better if you just amass huge amounts of data and then wait and pray for something good to happen.
Magic to happen.
Whereas the good thing about AI, in a way, it's a bit more focused on about how are we going to use that intelligence, right? So what are we going to do with it, right? So, and getting real and doing AI, seeing AI not just as a noun, but as a verb. I think that's a very kind of a healthy attitude. Also to demystify it a little bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's a bit like you almost have to dip your toe in the water and try it out and to, experiment with it and it's almost take responsibility for your own education.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that not just in a consumer perspective, but also in an enterprise perspective.
Exactly. Get some real sense of the real opportunities and also the real risks that you need to address, right? So as opposed to just magic returns, but also being scared of risks that are not actually there.
Yeah, sure.
Or the other way around, forgetting to address something which is important to address.
So anything else you want to kind of add? I know we're conscious of time. You're the kind of the busiest man at PegaWorld this year. I'm told this from an authoritative source. So anything else you want to add before I ask you a couple of quick wrap-up questions?
No, so let's go for the wrap-up.
Right, the wrap-up question. So the first one is, I've been asking people to boil all this down and to give me their best advice. So if somebody wants to leverage artificial intelligence, whatever the technique might be, to drive efficiency or productivity or better customer outcomes and stuff, and they want to get started, Peter van der Putten's best advice would be to do what?
Well, step one, then of course, some horrible self-promotion, but if you go to Pega.ai, you'll find the AI manifesto.
Okay.
And it's trying to answer that question.
Okay.
Because we work really hard. Like sometimes it's easier to write like a 10-page white paper as opposed to something which is really succinct.
Yeah.
So that's where we spent a lot of time ultimately writing a document with only 9 sentences,
Right.
pretty much. Okay. But it's 9 guidelines, or around 9, I believe, guidelines to make good impact with AI, right? So, but there's a bunch of lessons in there. But I think this kind of whole pragmatic approach of just doing it, I think it's time to start trying AI and not just talk about it.
Okay.
So I think that maybe that's very ominous, but I think it's time to get practical and do AI.
Yeah.
And then learn, what can it mean for you? Yeah, what it can mean for you as an organization.
Perfect. I will make sure I get that all linked up and get people pointed to it. So the penultimate question is, who's your favorite sort of experience-led brand right now? Who do you think is an experienced leader? Who's like out there, you go, think they're cool. They're kind of seem to have it all knitted together.
Yeah. Okay. So then, I'm going to be a little bit chauvinistic, but I'm going to nominate my own bank because in this case, I kind of experience what they're doing as a customer. So I'm a customer of Rabobank. I think I already mentioned it.
Yes.
And I think they're just. I grew up in this tiny farming village, and we even lived outside of the tiny farming village, in the middle of nowhere near the Belgian border. And if there was any kind of we had 1,200 inhabitants, whatever. But of course, that was the Rabobank was there because it's a bank with, let's say, agricultural heritage. Just opposite the church. And you would go there. They would be highly efficient in doing your banking transaction. Only take 2 minutes, but then you would have to spend 18 minutes talking about the latest gossip.
Right. Okay.
But that's just a funny story to say. Well, it's really important for them to be personal and to be relevant and to be contextual. And how can you do that? If pretty much all the bank branches are shut down and everyone is interacting with you through their mobile phone, right? And I think Rabobank did a really good job at providing that exact, going back to the 70s, right? But doing that in a modern banking environment.
Okay.
Right? So by making good use of intelligence, actually, in a way that it actually benefits the customer, getting all kinds of relevant recommendations in my banking app or whatnot, and that really still feels like the Rabobank from the 70s in a good way.
Nice. Well, big shout out to Rabobank.
Yeah.
And final question. So I have been doing this for a little while now, and I know it's Joe Richardson's kind of favorite thing, and Joe's actually kind of like a silent spectator, listener, kind of with us today. And because the world's a weird place, and we obviously the news is full of kind of like doomsday type stories. So I've been trying to finish all these podcasts with asking people to share with me a good news story. So Peter, tell me, say a good news story, or tell me something that you've seen in the last week or so that you think, yeah, that's cool. That made me smile, made me feel good.
Yeah. It's still going to be like semi-work related, but then maybe for my other job, like I'm also part-time assistant professor at Leiden University. And like I said, I'm also always trying to keep up with the cool kids there. And I have a student there, Bram van Koten. And he came to me and said, like, I want to do something in the area of depolarization and democracy, because we, like you said, we live in this environment where,
everybody's like,
yeah, exactly. And his idea was, there's these voting assistants that help people to select a party that would fit, what's important for them. But typically they follow a scripted path with some scripted questions. And there might be all kinds of bias in those questions as well. And they try to lead you as quickly as possible to one party to vote for. And so you can already guess that I live in a country where we have more than 2 parties. But he said, like, I want to flip that around. I want people able to talk about the things that matter to them. And then have a large language model basically go through all the political manifestos of the different parties and really fact-based, or at least what they promise in those manifestos, related back to, how different parties think about this particular topic that matters to me, right? So, and that also could get people a little bit outside of their bubble, because they might be surprised and that there's some, some political parties that they don't normally would consider that they're more aligned with their views that they think, or the other way around. Right? So it's trying to get people a little bit out of the bubble and in that way foster democracy, right? So a really interesting idea. We started to work together with an organization that actually came later, which it's called Open Elections, that are doing something similar. And we're running. We just ran a live experiment for the European elections on their website. So we're waiting to see the outcome and to see if whether it was, quote, successful or not.
Okay.
So, but I thought it's a nice example how AI could also be used for other things than just enterprise purposes.
I think it's a great story, and it's a great way of sort of pointing out something, just to actually hear about a young person that is taking some of this technology and are trying to apply it to some of the societal problems that we're all seem to be facing, these echo chambers and this kind of polarization and stuff. So that's cool. Thank you for that. So that's all I have. I know that you've got to shoot off before you get dragged off. But so, just want to say, great to speak to you again. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your insight and your experience. That's been awesome.
That was a great chat. Thank you.
Find out more about me and the work that I do at adrianswinsko.com. Do leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you have any comments, feedback, or questions about the podcast, then feel free to send me a message to podcast@adrianswinsko.com. Do tune in again. Thanks very much.